Hello and welcome to Anchor Academy. My name's Johanna Boland and today we're on location in Milan, Italy at Comat at this really, lovely clean facility here. For the first time, we're going to have a partner who's going to give their expertise around something that's very important for the grinding process and for getting the most out of your investment into that grinding machine. So here I've got Andrea, who's the General Manager of Comat. So Andrea, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Absolutely. Thanks, Joanna, for having us here at Anchor Academy. We're very pleased and excited about it. As you said, my name is Andrea Colombo. I am General Manager of Comat, second generation, a business that was started by my father and my business partner Daniele 35 years ago. We produce filtration system for grinding machines. We sell our filters worldwide, and we keep a variety of machines, including Anchor and many others. And we're very excited to have this opportunity to showcase our technology and our facilities. So what I've prepared here is basically 10 topics or 10 questions that we would normally ask to a customer in order to understand exactly what he needs, what's the best filtration solution for him, and therefore coming up with the right product that he should probably consider.
So the first tip is about the machine model. There's lots of different machines around, so...
First question I would ask to a customer is, which machine have you got and how many machines do you want to manage, right? So today we've got here an FX linear, but looking at your range, for example, you have FX, MX, TX, CPX. These machines are meant for different applications and they have inevitably different filtration requirements. So which machine have you got? And second, how many machines you want to manage? 100%. Second tip, would be flow rate and pressure, right? This is the key inputs that we will receive from O&Ms. So every machine wants a specific flow rate and it wants a specific level of pressure to perform at its best, right? So we want to make sure that we deliver that amount of oil and at that given pressure at all times. Yeah, so that's critical because you wouldn't want to mix dirty oil and clean oil, and so we need to make sure we always get clean oil at the required flow rate, at the required pressure.
So, you talk about flow rate and pressure, but what does that mean in a grinding application? I know we're going into applications next, but, why?
Well, look, it's very important to have the required flow rate that the machine wants. And again, depending on the type of application, the flow rate required or actually the pressure required could differ quite significantly, right? Some applications require 10 bar, some applications require 20 bars, some applications require 50 bars, right? So you start taking into account the performance of the pump that you want to use in the specific application. You may need a booster pump on top of that. And also I think you need to take into account the layout of your workshop, right? Because getting oil from here to here, you will get oil at a given pressure, but if you want to bring the oil 20 or 30 meters away from here, the pressure at the other end will be actually lower. So our engineers will assist you in sizing all the system correctly to make sure that the required pressure is there at the machine.
Okay, so really the bigger the tool, the more pressure you need. The smaller the tool?
Not necessarily.
No?
So it really depends on whether you're doing flute grinding, whether you're doing sharpening, resharpening, so the materials that you machine. So it's several factors, and your application engineer would probably advise at best as to what is the optimal grinding conditions.
Okay, so there are a number of different machines, but there's as many applications as you can think of. So what do you need to consider with the application of the tool?
So it is very important, that would be my tool tip number 3, to consider the application indeed, right? Because with your machines, they are very versatile and you can do different things, right? You can go from flute grinding to sharpening to resharpening. You can do taps, etc. So all these applications will ultimately result in a different amount of material removed, and also the morphology of the material removed will change, right? So the microparticles will have a different morphology. So we need to take that into account when we select the best filtration system and to size it correctly, right? Because we need to know how much sludge we are removing in a given period of time, right? So imagine you're grinding a gear for an electric motor, or you're grinding a dental tool. It's very different, right? It's very different amount of material that you're going to remove, and therefore I need to size the filtration accordingly.
So another question I've got is, do you ever capture the material that's been removed and do anything with it, or does that just go to waste?
No, absolutely. So the materials get collected out of the filter, and that has to be disposed of. There are waste management company that will handle this. Again, we can recommend waste management companies with whom we cooperate in order to make sure that the sludge is disposed correctly and according to applicable regulations.
So you talk about applications, and also different materials are used sometimes for cutting tools. So I imagine in some cases you actually want to keep what has been removed from the blank.
Absolutely. So the material machine would be my tooltip number 4, in fact. And it is very important that you consider what you're machining. Again, first of all, because different materials pose different challenges. Our system can take carbide, but can also handle steel, medical steel, ceramic, and all these materials pose different challenges, right? Then you have certain applications where you actually machine precious materials, gold, platinum, silver, etc. And therefore also the recovery of the material becomes very important, right? So every system will produce certain amount of sludge. The sludge gets collected and is normally disposed of with the help of waste management companies. We can help you selecting a good partner for waste management, albeit normally customers already have their own preferred suppliers. But yes, you can work with them to make sure that precious materials and valuable sludge are recovered, and so you get money out of it.
We touched on it a little bit before, but most people do use carbide, but there are high-speed steels and other materials that people use. What are the implications of that for the filtration system?
No, as I said, it's very important to consider this in your choice of filtration system. So carbide is the most common one, as you say, is a sinterized product, and it produces a sludge which is effectively dust-like. And this can be captured quite effectively both with cartridges or filter aid. But for example, if you are machining steel or medical steel, they produce a sludge which is very different, and cartridge system, for example, go under stress with that. Yeah. Or if you think about ceramic, similarly, ceramic is very clogging, and so going back to what we discussed before, sizing the system just based on flow rate may not be the right solution if you are machining ceramic.
So, if you're thinking about the different materials and you need to match the right filtration system, is that about going to the experts and asking them what the best system is for that?
Yes, absolutely. So all will go into the mix, and again, we go as deep as analyzing sample of oil that the client is using, etc., to understand exactly what is the filtration challenge posed by that specific material. We have been filtering in the past brass. We have been filtering glass. So any type of material. And again, you wanna think about it. You wanna study it and consider that in the context of the other tips in order to come up with a correct solution.
Okay, so now we go on to tip number 5, which is all about coolant or the oil that you're using. So over to you, Andrea.
Yeah, again, as I said before, I think coolant is another essential component into the machining mix, and therefore it is important that the filter system is capable to handle the customer's preferred coolant, right? So Comat system can handle any type of coolant. Clearly, we're talking about neat oil, cutting oil, not emulsions. But for example, we don't pose limitation to the viscosity of the oil, which is a key parameters where a client will want to have, or your engineers will want to have the flexibility to choose the most appropriate coolant for a given applications.
Okay, so let's see if I can get the word out. But you talk about viscosity.
Yep.
Can you just explain a little bit about why that's important from a coolant perspective?
No, viscosity is very important because, again, in different applications, you may need different things. So, for example, if you are machining carbide, you will want an oil that has low viscosity typically, and that's because you want to make sure that the oil sticks well and cleans the cut properly while machining. Conversely, for example, if you're machining steel, you want to have a higher viscosity because that's what the type of metal requires when it gets machined, right? So that's important. Another important thing is, for example, the level of foam that is produced in machining. So the oil clearly makes foam when it gets pressurized and sprayed into the machine. So when you're collecting that, it will come back with foam, and so you want to take that into account as well.